Hello everyone, it's your friend, your boy, Jet Black, the one and only, here with another exciting video, and in this video we're going to be talking about the Mutant Growth Hormone and Marvel Multiverse RPG. Let's get started. Mutant Growth Hormone is often abbreviated as MGH, is a chemical found naturally in all mutants. Once extracted and refined, it can be injected into regular humans to give them superhuman powers. People who already have superpowers can use it to enhance their existing powers instead. The powers granted by any particular dose of mutant growth hormone seem to depend on which mutant the drug was harvested from, but doses are sometimes blended, making the effects more random. Although the drug is called mutant growth hormone, it can actually be harvested from any superpowered person whose powers arise from genetic alteration of any kind. For example, there is a variant of the drug called inhuman growth hormone, which is derived from inhumans rather than mutants. Pay close attention to the fact that mutant growth hormone apparently only enhances the existing abilities of people who already have superpowers. So if you want to gain superpowers from mutant growth hormone, you would rather take it as a character who doesn't have any powers at all, baseline. Also, keep in mind that mutant growth hormone is a bit of a misnomer. It would be better to call it genetically altered individual growth hormone. So, gamma mutates, for example, should produce their own version of mutant growth hormone. Really, any entity who gains their abilities from some form of genetic alteration or mutation has a variant of mutant growth hormone. I believe this would also include the Eternals. They were experimented on by the Celestials, and I believe that's where they get their powers. They're like genetically altered, as well as the Deviants. I believe they also should have a form of mutant growth hormone. So just keep that in mind. And also, correct me in the comments below if you feel like the Eternals or Deviants don't count for whatever reason. We could definitely have a fun discussion about that for sure. Creation. Mutant growth hormone is usually sourced from mutants with active powers, typically taken from their blood. This blood can be donated voluntarily, but it is sometimes taken without the donor's consent. Scientists have attempted to synthesize mutant growth hormone, but no one has yet to develop a permanent and stable process for creating it. That hasn't kept them from trying, often by exploiting mutants for their blood and tissue. So there are a few different ways that I feel like you could collect the blood needed to synthesize a dose of mutant growth hormone. If you happen to have the connections trait that allows you to, ask superheroes or supervillains for a favor, then you could use that to request their blood. Then, if you happen to have a scientist's occupation as like a background, giving you lab access, you might be able to use your lab and the voluntarily donated blood to synthesize mutant growth hormone yourself. But you could also potentially, fight a mutant or a genetically altered superhuman, or go to the scene of a recent fight between, like, some force and a superhuman that's genetically altered, and just collect the blood from the battle. You don't actually have to ask for permission to get it. You can essentially take it through battle, take it from like the end of a battle, essentially scope out the scene. Or, like they said, you could involuntarily take it from them through other more, sinister means. Dosage. Mutant growth hormone is available in many forms. It's often sold as a tablet or capsule, but it can be injected as well. It's also been atomized into a gas that can be administered to an entire group of people at once, whether they want it or not. Each dose of mutant growth hormone lasts for 1 day. When it is administered to a character, the character goes up one rank. This grants them 5 ability points and 4 powers, and it bumps them +1 in their damage multipliers. If they have the heroic tag, they gain +1 karma. Instead of picking a new trait, the character gains the berserker trait. If they already have berserker, they do not gain a different trait. Instead, they have trouble on any ego check made for their berserker trait. Some forms of mutant growth hormone come with a specific set of powers and ability gains. These usually reflect the powers of the mutant from which the drug was harvested. In most cases, though, the MGH has been refined and blended to react differently depending on the genetics of the person to whom it is given. Unless the character knows where the drug came from, the narrator should spend the ability points and power picks for a dose and inform the player what happens to the character. Any further doses from that same source should have an identical effect. Now let's go over dosage, because trust me, there's a lot of interesting stuff here. So, for starters, it's mentioned that it is commonly sold. We haven't gotten to the legal issues section, but even though it's sold in a variety of forms, it's not the kind of thing that your characters could just go to a convenience store and grab a mutant growth hormone tablet for or anything like that. They would need black market access, which is really easy to achieve within Marvel Multiverse RPG. You can gain black market access through taking on the adventurer occupation, meaning you don't even have to be a criminal in Marvel Multiverse to gain access to the black market. Now, you could say, oh, well, it's expensive to acquire mutant growth hormone. So even if you have black market access, you can't necessarily afford it. Well, if your character happens to be rich, then, that's not much of a problem either. And as I mentioned before, if a character has certain connections and lab access, if they're like a genius, then they may be able to voluntarily get the blood of genetically altered superhumans and use their lab in order to synthesize their own mutant growth hormone. You could even have players work alongside each other and say, hey, you know, if you let me get a sample of your blood, I can then use that in my lab to make some mutant growth hormone that then I could use or you could use to boost yourself. Players could make deals in order to try and synthesize their own mutant growth hormone. There are a lot of different ways that you can take that. So just keep that in mind. Speaking of keeping things in mind, don't forget that mutant growth hormone gives you a rank up. It's only for a day, of course, but the fact that you gain 5 ability points, 4 powers, a rank up, and a +1 damage multiplier, not to mention if you're heroic, you get +1 karma, is ridiculous. Think about this in a session where you're already playing with rank capped characters, where everybody's already like rank 6. Mutant Growth Hormone essentially gives you access, potentially, to a rank 7 build. And if you want to get crazy with it, taking multiple doses could allow you to significantly jump over the normal rank cap. So that's pretty wild, not gonna lie. And the only real drawback before we get to the side effects section is the Berserker trait. So let's talk about the Berserker trait for a little bit. The character often loses control of their temper. Anytime they take physical damage, they must make an ego check with a target number equal to the amount of damage done. If they fail, they go berserk and must charge at full speed into combat with the enemy who hurt them. Being berserk gives the character an edge on all close attacks and adds +2 to their melee resilience and ego defenses. However, it takes -2 from their agility defense, and they cannot use ranged weapons. If the character defeats the enemy who hurt them, they must then charge to attack the next closest foe. At the end of the character's turn, they lose 5 focus. When their focus is reduced to the point that the character could not voluntarily spend any more focus, or if there are no enemies in sight, the berserk state automatically ends. Really, the only big downside to taking a dosage of mutant growth hormone before we get to side effects is this berserker trait, and the fact that if you already have the berserker trait, that you get trouble on any ego check made for the berserker trait. One question that I have is whether or not that trouble stacks. Because if you take 2 doses and you didn't already have the berserker trait, then you gain a ton of benefit. You go up 2 ranks, you gain 10 ability points, you gain 8 powers, and you get +2 to your damage multipliers. That's already insane from 2 doses. But will that third dose cause you to have double trouble on the ego checks? Because if so, that might dissuade you from taking a third dose. Just saying. Food for thought. Let's see. Let's talk about this dosage section and the benefits in regards to what I mentioned earlier about how if you already have superpowers, it can be used to enhance your existing powers instead. If I'm reading this correctly, it sounds like if your character already has powers, then they go up a rank, they gain 5 ability points, but they don't gain 4 powers, if I understand correctly. Or maybe if you gain 4 powers, it would only be in power sets that you already have, and then you get +1 in your damage multiplier. And then if you're heroic, you get +1 karma. I think it'll be up to the narrator how you interpret this, like whether or not you do gain the powers if you already have powers, but it's limited to just expanding your existing power set, or if you don't gain the powers and you just kind of benefit less from it than, say, a character who doesn't have any powers at all. Let's see. The refined blend, where you get a specific set of powers relative to your character's genes, is very interesting. I kind of like that. And the idea that the narrator gets to pick the powers is really fascinating. As a player, I could see you not liking that, not enjoying the concept of, oh no, like generic MGH is going to let the narrator give me whatever powers they want and allocate my stats however they want. That's not good. So, as a player, you might want to specifically get mutant growth hormone from specific sources the best way you can. Otherwise, you're kind of leaving it in the narrator's hands what powers you do or don't have access to. So, definitely keep that in mind. Also, keep in mind that if you have an ability like Powerful Hex, which essentially allows you to use any power as long as you already have the rank prerequisite for it, then you should be able to go crazy regardless of what the narrator gives you for your power selection, because you go up a rank higher, and now via Powerful Hex, you could use any of those powers that fit that rank prerequisite, at least for the 24-hour period that the dose lasts. And if you're taking multiple doses, then you go up multiple ranks, and it just continually expands your access to powers. It's a really solid combination. One that I should probably build a character around, but haven't. But I will show you a character build by the end of this video, so definitely stay tuned for that. Side effects. Mutant growth hormone causes heightened aggression in those who take it. This is represented by the berserker trait. All gains from a dose of mutant growth hormone disappear after 24 hours. The character simply reverts to their normal state. However, the drug can become addictive to those who take it regularly. This addiction seems to be more psychological than physical. When a character takes a dose of mutant growth hormone, they must make a resilience check against a target number of 5 plus the number of consecutive days they've taken it. With a failed check, the character becomes addicted. If a character is addicted and goes more than 24 hours without taking a dose, they enter withdrawal. They have trouble on all actions until they have taken another dose of MGH or their withdrawal period ends. Every full day an addicted character goes without the drug, they make a resilience check against a target number of 15 minus the number of days they've been without it. When they succeed, their addiction ends. Let's talk about it, because this is another section that's quite juicy. Now, a dose of MGH disappears after 24 hours, but let's say that you're playing a one shot where everything happens within a 24-hour period. Essentially, it's a session where there's no plans for the session to continue in the future, and where everything happens in a day. Mutant growth hormone has like no real consequences other than the berserker trait. You could take mutant growth hormone like 6 times in a session. Just take like like a ton of doses or whatever, and get like a bunch of powers and rank up several times. And as long as you don't care about like the berserker trait drawbacks, you don't even have to worry about addiction or what happens after the 24-hour period ends, because it's not going to end for you. This whole session is going to end by that time. So the character can kind of do it without any real in game drawback. A narrator might say that a character wouldn't be so reckless because within universe, they don't know that, this day is the only day in which they really exist and do stuff, but that's neither here nor there. Also, a lot of sessions can take place within a single day, not just a one shot. And if it's like, oh, well, what about like addiction and withdrawal and stuff? Depending on how many days lapse between that session and the next in universe session, you could always be like, oh, yeah, my character like got addicted or whatever. But like so many days have passed, and then you can like simulate the roles and probably be fine. Like, probably just get around it and it not be like a big deal. So these side effects to me are not that crazy, especially if you play one shots where the whole story happens in one day. And you may be like, the whole story happening in one day? What kind of sessions are you doing where only one day passes? I mean, think about stories like Batman Arkham City or Batman Arkham Knight or Batman Arkham Asylum. All of those stories have Batman do a ton of stuff in a single night. And you can do stuff like that in Marvel Multiverse for sure. The last one shot that I did took place in a single day. None of the characters took advantage of mutant growth hormone, but if they had, they probably wouldn't have had to have dealt with too many drawbacks from having done so. Now let's talk about legal issues. Mutant growth hormone is illegal in the United States and most other nations. This includes not only the possession and use of the drug, but the manufacturing, distribution, and sale of it. The penalties vary from place to place, but they are serious and often involve extended time in prison. So, that is a factor that if your character gets caught with mutant growth hormone, they could get into serious trouble. So keep that in mind. And this is also why you would likely want to have black market access, to be able to acquire mutant growth hormone because you cannot legally acquire it. And like I said before, in case it's expensive, you likely would want to be rich so that your character can afford mutant growth hormone. Because I could see money being the way that a narrator tries to lock it down, even from a character who has black market access. But keep in mind that even if your character is poor and doesn't have black market access, if you have the right connections, you should be able to acquire mutant growth hormone through a connection, or you should be able to acquire blood that you can then use in your lab to synthesize mutant growth hormone if you happen to have the background and resources for that. Now let's look at a few of my notes that I took about mutant growth hormone. Important stats for mutant growth hormone users are resilience for resisting addiction and ego for resisting berserker rages. However, resisting berserker rages might be more difficult depending on whether or not your narrator makes it stack for each time you take the dose, the trouble and the ego checks, I mean. So keep that in mind. Ask your narrator about how that works. Mutant growth hormone seemingly can defy rank caps as dosages increase your rank, grant you ability points, and give you 4 additional powers for 24 hours. Assuming you never roll the literal worst possible roll in the game, then you should always avoid addiction no matter how many dosages of MGH you take if you don't take it on consecutive days and have at least a +1 resilience modifier. This is because the resilience check is just a target number of 5 plus the consecutive days that you take MGH. So if you don't take it on consecutive days, like if you've only taken it within like one 24-hour period, then the check is 5 plus 0. And Marvel Multiverse is a game where you roll 3 6-sided die. So if you roll 3 6-sided die, as long as you don't roll literally the worst possible roll, like a 1 1 1 or whatever, then you're already rolling like 4. So if you add a +1 resilience modifier to that, you will always hit the target number and you'll never be addicted. Even if you took 5 or 6 doses of MGH all in the same day, you're not going to get addicted and you're not going to have to worry about withdrawal, which is really interesting. MGH is cracked for one-shot campaigns that take place over the course of a single day as it completely sidesteps addiction, which is what we've been talking about. Now let's go over a quick character profile for Power Shot. This is a rank 1 character that I created. They have no powers whatsoever. Power Shot, real name Powell Shooter, is a rank 1 with 120 health and 40 focus. They dumped all their stats into resilience and ego, and they did that by sacrificing power points to add to their ability scores. And they also sacrificed power points to add additional traits, specifically extra occupations. The occupations that they have are entertainer and adventurer. I think, would the rest be in biography, the other ones? Because I'm trying to remember. Oh, yes, they would. Tycoon, adventurer, and entertainer. Adventurer for black market access. Entertainer because it gives you special traits that give you an edge on ego checks, which you could use with your connections to help you better gain access to MGH, which is nice. And I think I went over everything. Tycoon for rich, adventurer for black market access, entertainer for you to be more persuasive with your connections in order to more easily acquire MGH. So these occupations really give you a suite of everything you need in order to easily acquire MGH. I didn't decide to go with a scientific background for this character. I don't see them going out of their way to make MGH themselves. They already have so many ways to acquire MGH. Now you'll notice that the origin that I have is mutant artificial. This is because the character's powers stem solely from them taking MGH. So even though they don't have any base powers, whenever they do take MGH, that is where their powers come from. Okay, giving you a basic look at their history in case you're interested. Adventurous, wealthy, traveling entertainer who uses their black market connections to acquire and utilize mutant growth hormone to fight crime as a superhero. They're motivated to fight crime by their thrill seeking personality and desire to please the public, which is also what motivated them to be an adventurer and entertainer in the first place. And their success as an adventurer and entertainer is what has led to them gaining great wealth and becoming a tycoon. All kind of connected together in that way. They're a people pleaser. That's their big thing. And they love the adrenaline rush. Now, let's talk about some of their traits and tags. We kind of already did. There are some neat things in here. They have celebrity connections, which, some celebrities be doing drugs. Might be able to gain access to mutant growth hormone through some of these celebrity connections. They also have connections to superheroes or supervillains. Supervillains may be able to supply them with mutant growth hormone. Superheroes may be able to supply them with blood that they could then get synthesized into mutant growth hormone, which is something that they could pay to have done. Whether they pay a scientist on the black market or they get a supervillain to do it for them, they have options for sure, and they're rich. They could pay a legitimate scientist to do it for them, albeit there may be some persuading that needs to be done to do that. But luckily, they're famous, which already kind of gives them an edge on, ego checks with people who are, oh man, this is like a famous celebrity. Ooh, if they're starstruck by you, they might be more willing to help you do stuff. The character's fearless, so you get a check. No, not a check. You get an edge on checks that involve being brave. You have presence, which gives you another ego check when trying to convince people to do stuff. And you have public speaking, which gives you a check, specifically an edge on checks, ego checks, when talking to multiple people all at once, which is also pretty nice. And I use Battle Ready in order to heavily boost the character's focus. Because remember, Berserker is going to eat away at that focus as long as you stay Berserk. So that's just a way to keep you from draining all your focus super fast. Give you a little bit of extra padding. But yeah, because this character has absolutely no powers, you don't have to worry about the downside of MGH gives you a boost to your powers, but doesn't actually give you powers. You should be able to get a bunch of powers by taking multiple doses of MGH. Feel free to take this character as inspiration for your own MGH inspired build. Feel free to build your characters however you want to and play however you want to. I hope this video was helpful, and I would love to hear your thoughts on mutant growth hormone. Do you think it heavily affects the game? Has it heavily affected any of your sessions? Do you think it's going to be involved in future sessions? Have you talked to your players about it? Have you talked to your narrator about it? Let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comment section below, and thank you again for watching. This is your host, your friend, your boy, Jet Black the one and only, logging out. Peace, guys. Check it a bow.